All right, so last time I got to bare my soul to the world. um, and well, that was good because not only is it just me sharing my story, I got to work some things out,
Mhm.
especially at the end after you kind of shared some feedback. I was like, oh, yeah, I was enlightened by sharing my own story. You said you learned some things about me that you hadn't because of
Mhm.
our relationship previously as me being the coach, you being the client. Um, and now it's your turn. It's your turn
Okay.
to tell the world about Jenny.
Ooh.
And I think
Ooh.
it's so I think something we said at the near the end of the last recording we want to lead with every time. And I think this is becoming a little bit of a battle cry for us.
Mhm.
We are not experts. We are not trying to be. We're just documenting our journey and inviting all of you to come along. So this part of our journey is Jenny's story.
Telling our story. Yeah.
So Jenny, what's your
Okay.
story?
Okay. Um, Brendon mentioned that he made little bullet points just right before we started recording. I made a few bullet points, but I've had this kind of story going in my head, knowing I would talk about it. And I too am not going to start the day I was born, but I am going to start with just a moment of young preteen teenager, this overriding, I think we can relate to feeling of not enough.
Hmm.
Just, you're not enough. You're not enough. You're not pretty enough. You're not thin enough. You're not good at athletics enough. You're not popular enough. And that I think is a very common theme that most of us can relate to. It's
Yeah.
I talk about I've had awesome mentors in my life, and I'll mention, our lives are like this, and then we kind of have an undercurrent. And that undercurrent of me growing up was kind of this theme that I heard from the world, not necessarily my parents or anything, was just that I wasn't enough. So taking that into adulthood, my story of kind of where I'm at now, coaching, um, life coaching, nutrition coaching, actually did begin in a CrossFit gym, which is unusual, but in a way it's where I needed to be. So I was in my mid 40s, and I was in just regular CrossFit class. And I don't know if anybody can relate to this, but I always had a nemesis. I think that's the right word. Someone I was trying to chase,
Yeah, a
and I was
nemesis. Yeah.
always I was always trying to beat that person. They didn't need to know it, right? They didn't need to know it, but secretly I wanted to beat them every time. And I thought about that before we recorded, and I was like, I guess I'm competitive. And I was like, or am I just trying to make sure that I am enough? You see that? It's like
Yeah.
people say, I'm competitive, I'm super competitive. I would never say I am, but I will say I still struggle with the desire to be proving that I'm enough. So let's take me back to mid 40s. I was in CrossFit for a few months, and one of the pinnacles to me to seem like you were really cool was to climb a rope. So that's something. If you're unfamiliar with CrossFit, you sometimes you climb a rope, and I had learned how to climb a rope. Didn't really think a lot about it. I was proud that I could do it. And one day, rope climbs was a part of the class, and a girl who was my nemesis came up to me and said, Hey, Jenny, can you teach me how to climb a rope? First thought is absolutely not, because you will then beat me, right? You'll be better than me. And at that moment, I had the opportunity and huge blessing of having an incredible woman in my life who was my mentor. And she used to always tell me, there is enough Jenny for Jenny. There's enough. She would say it to me over and over. There's enough Jenny for Jenny. And I'd be like, what the heck? I don't really know what you mean. It would frustrate me, but I would listen. And as literally my hands are hanging on the rope and I'm looking over at her thinking, nope, I will not share myself with you. What came into my head was, there's enough Jennie for Jennie.
Wow.
And I taught her how to climb a rope. My rudimentary, very, primitive ways of what I knew, I taught her how to climb a rope. And honestly, the class went on, and it was kind of toward the end of the class. I think we're, leaving for that hour that we were together, and she comes up to me, he's like, hey, come here, watch me. And I went around the corner and I watched her climb the rope. And as she was climbing, I'm looking up and I'm thinking, this feels really good. This does not feel like I gave any part of me away. In fact, I feel fuller and bigger and more like Jennie. And I thought, oh, my mentor's name is Anne. She's passed away, but I was like, Anne was right. There's enough Jennie for Jennie. And from that, I became more and more interested in the idea of coaching, specifically CrossFit. So I got my certifications and started to coach. And I mentioned a little bit about that last week about just learning how to teach people to move. And in that process, I became very, very honored with the vulnerability people would show me, especially a brand new person coming in trying to learn something they've never known before. And I began to think, this is way bigger than teaching someone how to squat, right? And there are distinct moments where I feel like God is showing me something about my life. And I can remember a distinct moment of teaching a class. And it began with jump ropes. And I started the music and I turned the music up and I turned around and I saw everybody doing the same thing and everybody giving it their best effort. And this lightning bolt thought was, this is what life's about. It's not about jumping rope. It's about we are together striving in a really vulnerable time of like effort, and we're doing it together. And I was just moved to tears while people are jumping rope. But what kept happening through that was that I was able to learn that the more I gave in a healthy way, the more I got back. And it was this beautiful thing that I put in my heart, and I can still pull out that same feeling and see that picture in my mind today. Throughout my coaching at that CrossFit gym, I ended up getting divorced, and that was never part of my plan, never part of what I ever thought my life would be. And it was the hardest time of my life, and the most grieving and the most letting go. And in the midst of that, I continued to coach, but just kind of from a hollow heart. But what I can see now is that process of everything being stripped away, everything where I thought was going to happen in my life was obviously not going to happen. I began to kind of relearn who I was, what life meant, what work meant, what taking care of myself meant, and seeing life from a very different perspective. Again, I've had the honor of having these beautiful women as mentors in my life. And one of my mentors would always talk about life being a tapestry. Like, if you guys are aware of a tapestry, right, or a needle point, and you see this beautiful picture on the front, well, if you turn it over, it's all those knots and threads and things that don't look like they make sense at all. But the picture on the other side is this beautiful picture that gets to enjoy and be seen and appreciated by other people. And throughout that time, she would always encourage me, one of my other mentors, that my life was that tapestry, that those knots and those hard places and that pain was really going to create a beautiful picture, for myself, for others. And it was the hardest time of my life. In fact, I look back on that time a lot and think, how did I do that? How did I do that? How did I begin a whole nother life alone, not thinking that that was going to be my life? And that was just where I know I was held and I was being brought along, and just doing one step at a time, like the next right thing, just keep moving forward. There was a time, in amongst that kind of healing, where I knew I needed a vacation. And I had never ever gone on vacation without someone kind of helping me plan it. Like at the time
Yeah.
when I was married, my husband would make the plans and we would decide where we want to go, and then we would get there and things would flow, more easily without me being really involved. And I knew I needed a break. I was getting pretty burnt out and I knew I needed to get away. And it was the first time I decided I could take a trip by myself, that I could actually go on vacation by myself. I had never like booked a flight or a hotel or anything. And I ended up actually going to Kansas to talk with my counselor. I had a whole little week of like, I wanted to just have kind of a self-care vacation. And
Yeah.
I booked a little tiny house. I always wanted to stay in one of those. And it was in a beautiful little town that I just got to enjoy and have a lot of time talking with my counselor, who kind of helped get me through my divorce. And it was at that time that we talked a lot about what I saw a vision for my life in the future. Like, what did I want? What did I want to happen? And she had this beautiful picture. If you can't see it, and those of you listening behind me, I have a copy of the picture, and it was, a big elephant, and then a little elephant was in front, and the big elephant was kind of leading the little elephant forward. And it was random, and it was one of those times where I'm like, this lady's crazy. But she's like, do you see that? Do you see that picture of the elephants? And I was like, yeah, you know. And she's like, which elephant are you? And I said, oh, I'm definitely the big one. And she's like, really? And why is that? And I was like, because the big one is leading the little one. And she's like,
Hmm.
oh, okay. She's like, you're not the little one. I was like, I'm not. I'm not. I know 100% in my heart, I am that big elephant. And she's like, okay. She's like, I'm seeing things in your life where you are having these opportunities to hopefully lead. Um, just as I was learning and growing about myself and coaching, and doing more and more of growing and learning about who I was, and able to probably help other people do the same. At that time too, like I mentioned last week, I was nutrition coaching, and nutrition coaching gave me the beautiful opportunity of meeting with people one on one, and really, again, the honor of their vulnerability, of learning about their lives and how they could reach goals of being more healthy, and doing that in a very, gentle, loving, self-care way. Because amongst my divorce and other things, I began to have some really disordered eating habits that, were pretty much keeping me in a place of bondage, that were keeping me, feeling like I had all this control, and really I was being controlled by weighing and measuring my food, and just some obsessive behaviors. And so I was able to kind of be approached to stop those behaviors, and through a lot of therapy again, and learning how to be a nutrition coach, I was able to pull away from that. And so that's the approach and the honor I got to take then when I got to coach people, is we can be healthy without being obsessive. And being healthy is
Right.
is 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 about food, but it's also about our entire lives and how we want to choose to take care of ourselves. Fast forward to me kind of getting to this place of talking with you, and then the more and more I trust that I am that bigger elephant. But if you think about it, elephants are in herds, right?
Yes.
They're never like alone. They're together, and they're working together, and they're leading each other. And I'm just learning, like we just talked about, if you heard the podcast before, we're leading each other home. And so it's just, I am in awe of how our lives work to create where we are today. Nothing's wasted.
Right.
No experience I had, no matter how painful or joyful or doesn't seem like it matters, it all belongs. It all belongs in who I am, who you are, who we are talking to today. The tapestry behind the scenes is becoming this beautiful picture. And I get the honor and privilege, hopefully, of reminding people of that. And you had a quote. I was like, okay, now this is where we're like thinking on the same. Now I mentioned 2 podcasts ago, I guess, about the ripple and how when I
Yes.
did begin to heal, I saw myself as that pebble being thrown in the water and rippling out, hopefully healing. And so I found the poem that really brought that to mind. And the author, her name is Danielle Dobby, Doby, but it's called Ripples. So I kind of want to end with reading this, and it's just
Awesome.
beautiful. Okay, it says, when you create a difference in someone's life, you not only impact their life, you impact everyone influenced by them throughout their entire lifetime. No act is ever too small. One by one, that is how we make an ocean rise.
That's really good.
Right?
Wow.
Yeah. I love the one by one.
Yes.
That's how we make an ocean rise. The impact
Yep.
maybe we have to one listener
Yeah.
from this would impact their lives, and then that would impact the people in their lives, and it's just incredible, incredible.
I love the scale of that. One by one, we can make oceans rise. Like
Yeah.
making an ocean rise is small feat. I
Right.
mean, um, yeah, the scale of that uh, is awesome. It's humbling. Seems impossible on its own, but yet somehow that promise seems very true. That one by one we can make oceans rise. Love that.
Yeah.
I love, like you did with me. I wrote down a couple notes.
Oh, good, goody.
No, well, things you said that struck me as we were going along. When you opened, you talked about being competitive versus trying to prove that you're enough. Holy smokes! Like how intuitive that is to have that awareness that it's got to be true for so many people, because I think the validation a lot of us are longing to hear is that you have what it takes. You're enough. There's enough Jennie for Jennie. Is that it? Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we're all longing to hear that you are enough. You have what it takes. And a lot of us tend to overcompensate by either being competitive, or it could be anything. We try to be highly productive or successful or competitive, maybe any of those things. And so to have that awareness was awesome. And then that jump rope story, I love that story so much, because going back to the Buechner quote I shared last time of unexpected tears, it's best to pay closest attention.
Yeah.
At the seemingly silliest of moments, everyone's jumping rope, and not a lot of people like to jump rope.
Yeah.
You found like a whisper of beauty in that moment. You use the word everyone moving together at a vulnerable time. And I'm like, holy smokes, if that's not what we're up to, can you imagine a community of people at a vulnerable time, all of us willing to move together? leading each other home. Like all these little puzzles, all these little nuggets that Jennie's sharing are kind of connecting this nice puzzle together. I love that. Love that. Yeah, a lot of those things are really speaking to me. This is the other side of that same coin. Remember at the end of the last episode when I shared my story, you commented that you hadn't heard some of these things before, even though we've been working together for a very long time, just because of the nature of our professional relationship. Well, the other side of this is true is I haven't heard some of these like nuggets because you've been a client, and the way our sessions were always structured, it's okay, like what are we working on with Jennie? What are we talking about? What are we trying to find our way through? And rarely is there the opportunity for Jennie to share like that beautiful nugget. And I'm like, oh, wow, yeah, that blew my mind. So now I'm at a point where even though we know we are leading each other here, I have a chance to experience a little bit of Jennie the coach and Jennie the human being. It's really, really cool. I'm so thankful that I got to hear your story like this.
Yeah.
Because that's one of the first things we did is on one of the first calls. And you were brave enough to be very vulnerable and share so much of your story in one of our first sessions together. But I haven't heard your story like this. And I just love it. I absolutely love it. The insight that you've gained from your story, that's part of what makes you such an amazing intuitive coach. It really, really
does. Oh, thank you.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
I'm going to look up that poem, by the way.
Oh, yeah. I can send you a copy or send you.
Oh, sweet. I wrote that down.
Okay, she has a whole book. The book's incredible. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. I do think that I was thinking when I started to coach with you, I left out kind of my coaching story because I wanted you to learn just my life story because yeah. So it is true that you haven't got to hear some pieces of that.
That's so cool. Because again, we're just kind of documenting this journey.
Yeah.
This isn't, well, I shouldn't say this isn't us trying to educate an audience. People can and will, I'm sure, glean things from this and have revelations. But this is almost like you and I learning about each other more, even though we've worked together for so long. It truly is documenting this journey. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. That's cool.
And there's so many things you've said that I've written down that are just so relevant to, I think, what we might be creating or working towards here. I love it.
Yeah, agreed.
That's really good.
Yeah.
I like taking my little notes. These are good. I could always go back and look at these when I prepare for our next podcast and things like that.
Right. Yeah, I'm always along the way. Yeah, I take notes as well a lot. Helps me.
I take notes. No, go ahead.
Oh, and anchor a thought, right? You're like, oh, I gotta remember that. Yeah.
And whenever we had our sessions, it was, I think every single time. Did we ever do Zoom? I think every single time it was just a phone call. So I would take notes regularly during my calls because the last thing I want to do is interrupt. But I want to be able to catch something. Every now and again, I would interrupt. I think that's part of like maybe my style. Really wanted to catch something and point it out, I might interrupt you. But, I don't think you've ever seen like my little notebook with all the little notes I would take when we would have our coaching calls. My coach would always take walks in the woods. And I'm like, is he retaining any of this? And the next time I would get on the call with Matt's like, yeah, so how's A, B, and C you talked about last time? I'm like, you remembered? I don't even remember. I just don't have that sort of like brain yet. Like,
okay, because you would walk talking to me, and I thought the same thing. I was like, he's not paying attention.
Well, that's where I got that habit is from all my coaching calls with Matt. And it was great because, like, I don't know what you heard, but like his earbuds picked up all the ambient noise. So he was always hiking in the woods, and I could hear his feet like crunching on like leaves and sticks, like on a trail.
Yeah.
And it was such, honestly, it was such great like ambient noise. I never minded. Yeah, I
Okay.
remember. I'm like, how do you remember this? I flat out asked him that one time. I'm like, dude, how do you do this? How do
Yeah.
you remember?
Yeah. Did he like take notes? Now I'll take notes during a client and after they leave. I'm like, I want to remember this
Yeah, yeah.
that we touched on, or
I've had a few like face-to-face times with Matt, and I still don't see him take notes. He just must have one of those brains. I'm going to ask him. I have a call with him next week. Yeah, 28th. I have a call with him next week, and I'll be like, all right, or anything else. How do you remember all this stuff? Because he
yeah.
does. He does. And then the great thing about coaching is when a coach is able to bring up something from like 3 or 4 sessions ago and finally connect it, you're like,
Yeah.
where did that come from?
Right?
Witchcraft, it's sorcery. Life coaches should be burned at the stake.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's true. Just knowing, to me too, when you say that, there's a little thing in me that goes, oh, Jennie, you better be doing that. You better be connecting those dots for your clients. But the thought that I've taught myself to learn right after that is no, because I trust the God I know will teach me and reveal to me what I need to say and not say.
Yes.
Absolutely. I can relax. I can relax and listen.
So good. And 100% agree, and you're 100% right. So taking off the burden of needing to remember all this stuff and take the detailed notes because you want to recall it later, removing that burden allows us to be more present. And that sometimes is the most powerful coaching tool in our toolbox, is the ability for us to just sit and be present.
Mm-hmm.
Difficult.
Yeah, it is. It is. As you're talking, there is. I have an affinity, if that's the word, for foxes. Foxes have shown up in my life when I need to see them, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And so I had always taken this approach when I still do when I coach my CrossFit classes, that I would be as vulnerable as possible. And so I would always like to share a little story about myself while we're warming up, or what I did over the weekend, and get people to interact. And I remember one time I talked about I love foxes. They're super special to me. And this lady came up afterwards who was like a school teacher. And she's like, you need to read the book called Pax, Pax. I would recommend this to anybody listening. It's a children's, it's like
it sounds familiar.
Okay, it's about a fox. And you get to read through his lens of the fox world. He has a boy he's been kind of separated from, and he's trying to get back home. But one of my most favorite lines in that entire book, and I come back to it all the time, is Pax was with an older fox and the wife of the older fox, and the older fox died, and Pax didn't quite know how to comfort the wife, the mourning wife. And it says real distinctly, I'm gonna have to read it out loud next time, that essentially he just sat with her and sat next to her in her unknowingness. He just sat. Yeah.
Wow. That is beautiful.
I think about that few sentences in that children's book has given me so much comfort when I don't quite know what to do or say. I know that just being witness, that's a word, is huge. And that's what you're talking about, being present, right? Yeah. I'm gonna read that next time. I'm gonna read it. Yes.
I just looked it up. I'm totally gonna get that. That for that line alone. That's incredible.
Okay. It's such a good book. It's so good.
Plus, it's about a fox, so even better.
How can you go wrong?
How can you go wrong? We do see. I don't know if people are aware of our geographical differences. I'm in Cleveland, Ohio. Jenny's in the wonderful state of Texas, in the Fort Worth area. But
Fort Worth, yeah.
It is Fort Worth. Okay. I live right by our metro parks, which is like an award-winning metro parks, and I have red fox every now and again come through my yard. And a few years ago, there's even a litter of like little fox cubs.
Wow,
that's pretty awesome.
That's cool. Cool.
Somehow we're gonna have to work a fox into our logo of whatever it is this thing is.
Yeah, no doubt. Okay. It's being born awesome. Right now.
Exactly. We're documenting the journey as we go. Years from now, when people are like, do you know the story of the foxtail and their logo?
Yeah.
Go to episode 3 or whatever. Go to episode 3 of their podcast. Oh, man. That's how you'll be able to know the OGs, right?
Yes.
People who are down from the beginning.
That's right. I love it. I love it.
So I think this is a good place to wrap this one up. Jenny, thank you so much for your story.
Yeah.
Just doing us the honor of sharing it. No, I'm enriched having heard that, and I've been working with you for so long now. This was definitely a uniquely enriching experience for me, and I'm super thankful.
Oh yeah, I'm thankful to share it for sure.
All right, Jenny, and everyone listening out there in podcast land, whoever you might be, we'll see you next time as we continue to document this crazy fox-like journey we're on.
That's good.